What's up, whoever's out there? Hope everybody's doing all right on a Saturday night. Sorry I didn't go live at 6:30. Had a little setback, but good to go now. So hope everybody's doing all right on this Saturday night. Hope everybody's still safe and healthy. Um, got moving on to the second round of the playoffs now, so I figured I'd have some time on a Saturday night before we start meetings and everything tomorrow and get the playoff week started. Figured have some time to do a little live session tonight. Talk about playoff week, past game, things we did well, things we need to improve on. Um, so again, just figured while we had some free time, we'd jump on a weekend night. I know there's probably some college games going on that people are watching, but can't be any worse than going when we went live Monday night with Monday Night Football and Monday Night Raw. But crazy week here in Florida. We had Veterans Day, which no school. Trying to practice on days when there's no school can be tough sometimes, at least at the school that I'm at. And then Thursday got ourselves in a situation the day before a playoff game where they canceled school because of a tropical storm, and then they canceled all after school activities. So kind of weird getting ready to play a playoff game and you don't have your day before practice. You don't see the kids for 2 days or a day and a half before the playoff game, but we're able to make our way through it and get a win on last night and move forward to the next round of the playoffs. So, good situation. Obviously, again, a hectic week, not knowing what was going to go on with weather and having a tropical storm roll through. We didn't get in my area where I'm at. We didn't get anything real serious, just some rain and a little bit of wind, but got kind of lucky with the way the storm weakened and then how it pushed through. And but it's always tough enough when you're preparing for playoff games. We had a bye week the week before, so we were able to get some extra work done that you might not normally get done, which was okay for us. I think it worked in the long run, but there were some things that I think weren't great. Spent a little bit, you spend so much time preparing for somebody, and we were. Thank you, I appreciate it. We were, locked in on a situation where we had to defend certain things that we needed to defend on defense, and you work for 2 weeks on something and certain formations and coverage checks that you need to make and what you're trying to do with your game plan. And the one thing that I did find out, at least for our kids, is when we're doing something like that and working on a game plan, we probably need a little bit of time each day. And this is probably a good coaching point for you younger coaches or even older coaches. You probably need some periods every day where you work on some other things, just so you keep it fresh, depending on the ability to retain information and keep information. So we were working on some two back stuff and some Y off 11 personnel stuff that was going to give us issues within quarterback read game and some quarterback run stuff. And then pregame yesterday, when we go to our 7-on-7 session, our offense runs some regular formations that we see all the time that we hadn't practiced in 2 weeks. And, in pregame, we struggled playing those formations and those coverages, which are things that we've played all year. But we took 2 weeks to kind of just focus on what we needed to focus on to win a playoff game, and hadn't repped some 3x1 checks and some 2x2 stuff. And I found out in pregame that our kids, almost forgot how to play some of that stuff. As crazy as that sounds, um, and so kind of learned a lesson in pregame that even though you're working on a game plan and you're working on getting things done to defend an opponent, especially during playoff situations where every game is win or go home, and you're all in on defending certain sets and things from an opponent. Probably need to uh, still, whether it's 5 or 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes a week, still need to go back and hit on some other formations and coverages just to make sure it stays fresh in your kids' minds, so that you can continue to move forward. So we found out pregame that when our offense came out and some stuff, just throwing 7-on-7 stuff, found out that our kids kind of forgot how to play some stuff. So just kind of neat sometimes in coaching, the journey that you go on. And I've been a head coach for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of situations, seen a lot of football. Excuse me. I've dealt with a lot of different situations, and that was just interesting to see how quickly our kids forgot. Hey, great job, Colton. Anytime you can get somebody back that beat you earlier is obviously a great feeling and a great coaching accomplishment, because obviously you made some changes and got some things done that they didn't do. So that's just, hats off to you and your coaching staff and your players. But it's just a reality check to understand in high school football that things that you think are base and normal and easy, and things that you would expect your kids to know, sometimes they really forget how to do some things. And it was just it was shocking and alarming at first. But after we got through pregame, and luckily we didn't see any of those formations throughout the course of that game, but just kind of figured out in pregame that moving forward, even though we're preparing for certain opponents and formations, we probably need to cover some things and some base formations, whether it be 2x2, 3x1, or empty, just to give your kids some awareness of how you do certain things in certain situations. And the good thing was we were kind of really zeroed in and focused in on defending what we needed to defend to win a playoff game. But just alarming in the fact, or in the sense, that our kids kind of got so rusty playing things that you thought would be routine, and without repping those things, how quickly high school kids can kind of fall off or get removed from information that you think would be normal. So it's just to me, it's just a good teaching moment. Whether it's football or any sport or any academic venture. If you're teaching in a classroom and you have things that, a lot of times you prepare for certain tests, maybe it's end of the year tests or certain things that you've got to get done for your kids, or your teaching evaluation, and you focus in on things that you think are going to be on the exam, and you get away from things that you did throughout the year. And then all of a sudden you go back and you look at that, and your kids forgot to do things that you did throughout the course of the year. So it's just kind of interesting. You always learn things like that as a coach. Every situation or opportunity that comes up like that, you always learn something new, something different. And we learned that throughout the course of the year, throughout the course of what's going on, that we had better hit on some things every day, whether it be run fit things or coverage issues or certain formations that you're going to see all the time that you need to get covered, to give your kids a familiarity of doing it all the time. So you'd like to get to a point, depending on the experience of your team and your players, you'd like to get to a point where you could do things. You have a base way of doing things, and your kids know how to do that. So at any time you could go back, whether it be a blitz or a stunt, a D-line movement, a coverage. If it's something that you do often or all the time, you'd like to think that you could go back and do that at any time, but it was just interesting to see that, with missing a couple days of reps, how easily our kids got away from that stuff. So, again, and it wasn't even a game time situation. It was a pregame situation. It was nothing that happened um, throughout the course of the game that caused us issues or caused us problems. It was something that happened in pregame. And as a coach, you probably shouldn't um, maybe get all bent out of shape about a 5 minute 7-on-7 pregame. But to me, it was just an eye opener to see that, some of our kids, after honing in on a game plan for so long, to see that some of our kids that forgot how to do stuff. So again, it's always, coaching is always about learning. It's about figuring out situations, figuring out the kids you have playing for you, figuring out what they can do, what they can't do, figuring out how they learn, figuring out how they retain information, and then trying to figure out what you need to do to keep that information retained. Whether it be an offense or a defensive scenario, and you get to a point in the playoffs, like I said, on both sides of the ball, or even special teams. You get to a point in the playoffs where you'd like to say, "Hey guys, remember a couple of weeks ago we had to do this," or remember a couple of weeks ago we kicked off and we covered it like this, or we had a certain kick return that was like this, or a punt return or a punt block that was like this. You'd like to think that at any time you can line up in those things because you've done them before, but when you realize in high school football what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with, sometimes you kind of figure out, hey, if we don't cover that stuff, if we don't touch on that stuff, um, it kind of goes by the wayside. So that was interesting, coming from a pregame scenario, and taking every aspect you can take as a learning experience, and trying to figure out how to grow and get better. Um, but as far as the game went, we were pretty solid, played good defense, only gave up 7 points. The disturbing thing was, the 7 points we gave up was in a situation where we punted and backed the team up inside the 5, and then gave up a 13 play 95-yard drive, which was a little bit upsetting. But for the most part, did the things we needed to do, executed where we needed to execute, which is again, when you get into postseason, and you get late in the season, you like to see your kids executing, at a level that is up to your expectations. You want to play your best football towards the end of the season. You want to play your best football, when it means the most. So that was good to see. Good to see that our run fits continue to get better at times. We still struggle at times with some things, eye discipline, block recognition, block destruction. But we've got to a point now where defensively with our staff, we kind of feel comfortable with the things that we've got to do with our kids, the movements, the pressures, the things you got to figure out to put your kids in the best situation to make plays. And, I've always said when I've done videos before and I've talked to people about defense, if you could play your base fronts and coverages and stop people, the less that you need movement pressures, I think the better off you'll be, because when you move in pressure, every time you do that, I think you leave yourself sometimes vulnerable to other things. When you move into place. Sometimes you move out of place. When you pressure into good situations, but sometimes you pressure into bad situations. So, it's always good to be able to play base defense, but as you get a feel for your kids and your team and your talent, you start to kind of learn what they can and can't do. And, we're at a point now at this far into the season where we realize that sometimes to stop some runs and make some plays, we've got to pressure and we've got to move. And, with the kids we got up front right now, we don't always play great base defense. We struggle with double teams sometimes. We struggle spilling on a consistent basis. So, sometimes as a coordinator, when you can move, pressure, stunt into situations that your kids maybe can't do on their own, you find out that it helps. But you can't do that all the time. You can't do that every down and distance. You can't do that every game, every opponent. It kind of comes down to game plan situations and who you feel comfortable pressuring, what your matchups are in coverage, what they do, down and distance wise that you feel might affect how you pressure? Um, Things that you feel leave you vulnerable? Can they attack? Uh, so, um, this past week we were probably 65% pressure on Friday night, as crazy as that might sound. 5, 6 man pressure stuff. We were probably 60 to 65% of the night just because I felt like it put us in a better situation. And I felt like against the opponent we were playing that they didn't have some of the answers to the pressures that I thought other teams might have. We got comfortable pressuring. It was mostly zone pressures, Jason. Mostly 3 under 3 deep, and then some 2 under 3 deep hot stuff that we actually, the back end of it, we weren't great with our alignments and how we were doing some things. So we got to get that cleaned up. But it was just one of those things where once we know what we liked off film, we know what we liked off tendencies, we know what we liked within the matchup, and then when you get into the game, you got to kind of see where you fit with that stuff. So, we definitely kept in mind as a person calling the plays, as a coordinator, I definitely kept in mind field position, down and distance when I was pressuring. Stayed out of as many man pressures as I could. I think I might have ran 2 man pressures the other night, but just kind of mixed up where we were bringing it from. We brought it from inside. We brought it from off the edge. We ran some field boundary stuff where we brought a corner from the boundary as a 5-man pressure. Set the front to the boundary, set the 3 and the 5 to the boundary, and brought some pressure from the field, bringing the will and the weak safety from the field. That was good to us at times. So, again, it's just a matter of understanding your kids, your personnel, your game plans. And now this week we go back to a team that beat us 2 weeks ago, scored 2 touchdowns with less than 9 minutes left in the game. The last touchdown they scored with 8 seconds left and beat us by 3 points. Had a 32-27 lead with about 3 minutes left in the game, and they drove down the field and punched it in with about 8 seconds left on the clock. So that was a little bit disheartening. A tough loss, but we now draw that team again in the second round of the playoffs. So you get a chance to bounce back, look at what you did the first time, fix some things that you need to fix, and obviously they're going to fix some things too. They've got the same. They've got the film of the game you played the first time, and now they got your playoff game that we just played. So obviously they're going to have a chance to adjust and fix some things. So that's always a neat and interesting thing when you play somebody for a second time. Hopefully we can have the same luck that Colton Addison had with them playing somebody again. Probably might have favored Colton's team a little bit that they got blown out the first time. Maybe the team didn't take them as seriously. Maybe they didn't have a great week of practice, didn't make a lot of adjustments because everything they did worked. And then you come back and you make adjustments and they don't have answers for it. That's always an option if you get beat soundly sometimes by a team that you have to play again. I was involved when I was a high school player. I was involved in a situation where we won a championship game after losing 42-6 to a team during the season, and we came back and beat them 12-6 in a championship game. So we were able to make some critical adjustments that we needed to make. And, I think sometimes for teams that beat somebody easily first time around, I think second time around sometimes is even tougher for them to get motivated than it is for you to get your kids motivated. So, hopefully it's something that we can bounce back from. And, from a coaching standpoint, the interesting thing is now going back and trying to fix some things that you need to get fixed, whether it be run fits or coverage. For us, it's going to be a run fit deal. It's going to be some QB runs and some gap schemes that we've got to make sure that we are, good eye discipline and we're spilling and our backers are running where they need to run and our safeties are setting the edge and backside safeties are folding in the box. And so it's going to be a lot of work within some run game stuff. And then there's some 3-back goal line heavy stuff that we've got to defend better and make some personnel changes and get our 3 safeties, maybe get a safety and a corner off the field and get 2 linebackers or a D lineman and a linebacker on the field to some of those heavy sets. So it always makes it fun when you're playing somebody second time around, especially when the first game was so contested. close, losing a game with 8 seconds left, and you feel like there's some coaching obviously that you can do to change those results, and you feel like you need to do a good job motivating your players to get ready to come back and play somebody that beat you once already. So, um, the good thing is we're now into back to playing 4-2-5 stuff, which is I'm kind of comfortable coaching, gotten away from the odd stack stuff that we were doing based on personnel and things we were struggling with, and um, so it's neat just to see how you can go back to something that you trust and something that's been good to you before, and how you make changes, mid-season based on personnel and talent and things like that. So it's been an interesting year. It's been hopefully for you guys that have been able to coach and practice and play a little bit. Hopefully you're learning and growing and getting better. And like I said, even as a 20-year coach, that does a channel and tries to do information to help other coaches, I'm always learning week by week, day by day, game by game, practice by practice, things that we need to do better, things that we need to change, things that we need to adjust. So it's been good from that standpoint. It'd be interesting to hear from anybody, Colton or any of you guys that are playing out there. Anything new you guys are doing, or things that have worked for you offensively or defensively. Maybe some things you picked up in the offseason during the pandemic, or maybe some things that you implemented, offense, defense, or special teams. Maybe some practice plan things that you're doing a little bit different. It's always interesting to exchange information and figure out, how everybody else is doing things and where and why they're doing them. I know for us, like I said, going back to 4-2-5 stuff, even front stuff, controlling where the 3 technique is, changing how we read some things with our backers. We've been last couple of weeks we've been a little bit more consistent reading center to guard, so getting away from reading backs and reading the center, and whichever way, playing a lot of gap scheme teams. So center's going to block back, and you're going to get pullers a lot on power counter. And for us, when we're playing gap schemes, we really love our 2 inside backers reading the center, because when he blocks back, to that side, you get a puller, and now we can really run and fit, try and gain bodies. That's when you're playing gap schemes, power counter stuff, they're pulling guys to the front side. They're gaining bodies to the front side. You got to try and gain bodies to the front side. So whether it be those linebackers, the backside linebacker trying to beat double teams, whether it be the 3 technique, stoning double teams and splitting them to where they can't get to the backside backer, your front side backer, if you're spilling, running a good tight course to the defensive end that spills, and whether he takes on the puller, and tries and send it to the apex, or if you box the puller back to your other backer inside, however you decide to play defense, all those things that you need to do. And for us, reading the center with our inside backers has been the best way for us to combat that, to get our linebackers where we need them. Our linebackers, we didn't have a lot of experience at linebacker this year. We played a 9th grader at times. We played senior that had never played football for me before, another senior that had no quality reps as a starter. So really only had one backer that had seen varsity football, the speed, the schemes, the run fits and based on coverage. And so, but what was good for us, at least for me as a coach with the 4-2-5, was I'm now able to fix issues, in fits and things that we're struggling with, whether it be setting the front a different way, setting the 3 technique somewhere different, how I control the D-line stunts based on where the 3 technique is, trying to set the front field a boundary, trying to give different looks, by changing how we align the 3 technique, moving the 2 interior guys to where it now post-snap becomes more of an underfront and an overfront. What we're doing with our apex guys and how we're getting to those 8-man fronts, and where we're getting our extra defenders from. For me, it's just a little bit more comfortable, even though the last 2.5 years we had done a really good job and played really good football in the 3-3 stack. I just never felt as comfortable with adjustments in the 3-3 stack. I was fine with the fits. I was fine with our game plans, but in-game adjustments, a lot of times when we didn't have a 3 technique or a 2-eye, and we were true odd or even if we were tight front. I just felt like coaching, I didn't have as many answers. If the game plan was good and our execution was good, we were sound, but I didn't feel like I had as many answers with dictating where pressures were coming from and where movements were coming from. And now back in the base 4-2-5, I just feel more comfortable, um, with where our movements are coming from and how we're controlling those movements and things we're doing to alleviate the issues we have. And I think anytime as coaches, I think that's the biggest thing you can do for your players is find ways to fix and alleviate the issues that you have. You can't usually for most teams with their roster, you can't change them with bodies. The guys that you're playing are probably the best that you got available. You're not going to pick up bodies mid-season. Maybe some young kids get better, but usually throughout the course of a season, the best you got is the best you got, and you get kind of stuck playing with those guys. And then what you need to do as a coach is you need to find ways to protect the weaknesses that you have and the personnel that you have. And for us, I just know that the 4-2-5 stuff is an easier, better way for me to control how we do that. And it's different for everybody, but Colton, if you're still out there, what do you think? What changes did you make, or what did you do different? For the guys that are still listening right now, that we can learn from. What did you guys do different? Was your approach in practice different? Was your structure different? Did you pressure more or less? Did you change coverages on the back end? Did you change reads? Just kind of go through maybe some of the simple things you did to go back and beat a team that blew you out earlier in the year. I think that's something everybody can learn from. We try to get our base, Carmine, we try to get our base stunts and movements taught. And then we try to get, the front taught how we want to set it. And then we go to some field and, then, simplistically, especially if we're seeing a lot of teams that aren't true 3-man surfaces, whether they be Y off or 10 personnel, we go to a lot of field boundary stuff to get our kids lined up correctly, to take the onus off the Mike linebacker to get the front set where we want it. We go to a bunch of field boundary stuff and then kind of control the movements from there based on down distance tendencies. But I think the easiest thing, Carmine, is to get your stunts and your pressures that you're going to use week in and week out. Get those things taught. Get your D lineman comfortable to hearing and seeing the signals for the calls and executing the stunts. And then from there, you build on getting them, to learn how to read when they're moving, getting your linebackers to figure out when you stunt, where the open gaps are going to be and how that's going to change. Trying to teach your kids the best you can. If you are exchanging gaps or taking things away, trying to get your backers and your apex players and your guys are involved in the run fit, getting them to understand where you're trying to get the ball sent with certain movements, and then repping your pressures to different formations, and whether it's 300, 3 deep or man free or zero or, whatever it might be, just getting your kids comfortable with repetitions first is the biggest key. Making sure they can execute the calls in a standard base fashion before you handle the nuances of what that stunner pressure might look like against certain schemes or what it might look like against certain formations. Just for us, going from the 3-3 to the 4-2-5, the 4-5-6 defensive line movements that we had, the first thing was getting our kids to understand how we're setting the front, because in the 3-3 stack, we didn't set the front. So, there were no shut calls. There were no strength calls. We were kind of lined up in the 3-3 stack, and it was very simple, which is why we went to it and why we liked it. But that simplicity kind of backed us into a corner where we couldn't make adjustments that we needed to make. So, yeah, I mean, when you do that, Carmine, you're going to make checks to where you're going to teach them to set the front how you want to set it, and your checks might be tight, open, back, or away from the back. So if you're playing 10 personnel and you want to set the front to the back, you might have a check that's a back check. You might have a front that's an away check, which means set the front away from the back. If you're playing a three-man surface team, you might have a tight check where you set the front to the tight end. You might have an open check where you set the front away from the tight end. Once you kind of establish those rules for the Mike linebacker, then it's just a matter, it's a matter of him seeing formations and understanding what you're trying to do with the calls and where you're trying to set the front. And, the biggest thing for us that we focus on a lot of the times is if we're struggling setting the front or if we're late setting the front, we'll just go to playing field and boundary stuff to make sure we're set. And then we'll, stunt, move, and do some things from there so that even though you may not always get the three technique where you want them by game plan, sometimes getting them set and ready to play is more important than chasing a game plan of how you want to set them or where you want to set them. And so, sometimes, again, depending on the experience of your players and how football savvy they are, sometimes like we go to situations where we just go field boundary, and simply because our kids start to panic a little bit. And when they start to panic, then they don't get lined up. And then when they don't get lined up, they don't have good eye discipline. And if the other team is having success, then we start to panic even more and we try to make plays that we shouldn't be making. So for us, it's all about getting back to keeping things simplistic and keeping things as easy as we possibly can. There's been some games, Darius, where we have run trips front side, nub back side. We've been 11 personnel trips with a nub on the backside. We've been 12 personnel double tight end trips. I know 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago we ran a bunch of tray sets with a nub on the backside. So yes, we've done that before. Yeah, when the passing game and the quarterback gets hot, especially at the end of the year or during the playoffs, that can take you a long way. You get some matchups. You're always going to get in the passing game, in my experience in high school, you're always going to get some matchups that you really like and some coverages that you really want to attack. You just got to execute. So, when you have an older quarterback that's playing well, it certainly helps, and especially when it's late in the year, that's always a good thing. So, yeah, when you recognize cover one, Colton, obviously you guys did a great job with your game plan and executing some wheels and some rubs and some things that are going to give cover one some issues. So, again, hats off and congrats on doing that and the kids doing it. Yeah, Adrian, that's about when we do it. That's about how we do it. We start off setting the front to a three-man surface. If we get, if we get three-man surfaces, we're going to try and set the front to the three-man surface. If we don't get a three-man surface, but maybe it's 11 personnel Y off, we'll try and set the front to the Y off or the sniffer or the fullback. 10 personnel, we then go sometimes try and set the front to the back, sometimes away. We've had more success this year with field and boundary simply because we've only been back into 4-2-5 now for 3 or 4 games, maybe something like that. So we've had a lot more success field and boundary with the kids that we have right now. So, but I think that's a pretty good. I think that's a pretty good way of going about it. Tight end, three-man surface first, and then to the back, away from the back, and then passing strength wise, according to. I think it has a lot to do with how elaborate your D-line stunts are and how much you're trying to do with the D-line and your pressures to attack pass protections. Getting the front set right so you have movements ready that you're hoping that they can handle. So, especially or run tight end sets and because teams aren't used to a tight end who is used as that's always an interesting conversation with all the spread offenses that have become so popular throughout the last couple of years. I think when you have the ability to go back to tight end sets, to me right now in today's day and age in high school football, I think anybody that can go back and run the wing T successfully throw it a little bit out of the wing tee, break formations out of the wing tee, um, uh, double wing jet stuff, even flex bone stuff, anything that is different from the spread stuff that kind of everybody's running. I think if you can be good doing that stuff, you give yourself an added bonus because teams don't see it anymore and it's tough to defend, and teams don't know how to defend tight end sets, and teams don't always know how to fit runs with that extra gap in there. And teams spend a lot more time preparing and defending and setting their defense or their personnel up to spread teams. So, when you can go back and play some old school type football, I think it, to me, it's an added bonus where we're at right now in the game of football, and especially high school football when there's limited preparation time. Dealing with kids that may have a hard time retaining information and being able to play a lot of different things. And I think the more you can use tight ends on offense, and the more you can do things that people don't see anymore, I think you give yourself a better chance to succeed. Yeah, even if it's still spread stuff, Adrian, if it's pro style 11, 12 personnel, 21 personnel, people don't see it anymore, and they have a hard time defending things that they're not used to defending anymore. So I just think it's an added bonus for you. Yeah, T formation, full house stuff, three back stuff. It's just so it can be so tough based on the matchups, and even if you're only running three or four things out of it, it's as simplistic as a full T three back formation can be. It can be very effective if you've got three plays that all protect each other, and you've got your base play, and then you got some misdirection and maybe a perimeter run. Shit, three plays is all you probably need, and maybe if teams start seeing that over and over again, you may have to do some other things. But originally, when teams aren't used to seeing that first time they see it, you may not have to do anything else other than those three plays. I like Y off personally, Coach Greenfield, simply because it gives you the ability to split zone, gives you gives you gives you the ability to move that tight end. You can trade them, you can motion them. Obviously, you can trade them from a Y on situation. You can't motion them. I think when he's Y off, he still creates an extra gap. He's still a vertical threat. I know for us, defensively, one of the things that gives us some issues is when it's Trey Y off, 3x1 Y off, where that kid's outside the tackle box. He's a vertical threat. It's still two back by nature if they can run, some counter stuff and some power stuff. If he, depending on how you set your front, if he can get to your five technique, depending on what his alignment is. But the fact that he can go in motion, the fact that he can split flow zone and wham techniques inside, insert for ISO, to me, that makes it a little bit more versatile, more diverse, tougher to defend. But there's definitely some things with having him on that give you better angles, better double teams, puts him in a better position in the run game in certain schemes. So I think there's definitely a need to do both. But if I had to choose, I would choose Y off personally. I think that's a great point, Connor. That I just mentioned a little bit. If you can do both Y off and inline, they might align a little bit different. If that kid's on the ball, it might change whether they play a 7 or a 9, or if he's off the ball, it might change how they play. They might just treat that like a 5 technique on a tackle. So being able to do both is definitely a bonus, and seeing how they adjust to it. And then if your kids can do both, I think it's great to be able to carry both. It's not. I don't think it's difficult. Within your terminology, it's not real hard to do. So, anytime you can do both, I think it's definitely something that you want to do if you can do it. um, but Yeah, Jason, focus on fundamentals, and obviously conditioning and things like that, but focus on base things, fundamentals, block recognition, block destruction, how you fit runs, the coverages you're playing. I think sometimes when you're off for so long and you haven't played football, you can kind of get carried away with schemes. And as good as all that stuff is, I still think we learned the hard way in our first 3 games that fundamentally we weren't very good. We couldn't play any of our base stuff and ended up making some adjustments to try and cover up the inadequacies we had in our base defense and just got further behind than we needed to be. So definitely for me, I learned a little bit from this offseason, not having spring, not having full summer, not having a kickoff classic. We learned what we need to do and how we need to do it in the offseason. So I think that's kind of been good for us at times. But that's what in any instance, that's what coaching is. That's what coaching is all about: making adjustments and figuring out the things you can and can't do, and taking that and moving forward and improvising and adjusting the things you need to do to win games. And that's what makes it so great. And every year is different. So, you know, this year in a pandemic, it's been really different for a lot of people, but it's the same thing. You grow, you learn. Hopefully, you do things that make you a better coach and make your kids better players. Um, Carmine, um, and especially on Tuesdays, and we try to be as physical as we can, but you got to be careful. We only have limited amount of bodies and don't have a lot of depth, so try not to get guys banged up or hurt in practice. But our biggest thing is making sure we're fitting things correctly. So if we need to spill, we need to make sure that our helmet placement and everything is good and tight where it needs to be to spill. Um, and when we're filming practices or when we're coaching things, I'm more worried about the fits where they are than I am, worried about how physical it is at this point of the season. If you're not physical enough, then you're probably not going to win anyways. So we still try. You always want to preach physicality. We try to get our guys. We want to be chest to chest on ball carriers. We want to thud up. Um, but it's just one of those deals where right now it's schematically it's more important to make sure our block rec is correct, our eyes are correct, and our fits and our folds by our safeties are correct more so than it is being physical. Um, probably one full contact period, Coach Greenfield, if you want to call it full contact. We try to almost never go to the ground. We practice in shorts probably 90% of the time, shorts and uppers and helmet. And so we try to keep guys off the ground. We try not to go to the ground, try to do enough tackling circuit work where it's technical and fundamental tackling. We do gator roll stuff that, you don't need lowers for. We do it on bags a lot. And, so trying to get our work in that way with techniques, fundamentals, tackling, and then working more so on eye discipline and run fits and making sure we're where we need to be. And most importantly, trying to get guys to Friday night healthy. I think that's a big deal in high school because you don't have the bodies that college has. You don't have the depth of quality players that college programs have or bigger programs have. So for us, it's about getting our best players to Friday healthy in a situation where we feel like our run fits, our eyes are good, our plan is good, our game plan is solid, our kids know how to execute it, and then on Friday, hopefully you can get there healthy and with kids that are ready to go full speed. That's always the question in any program: how physical do you need to be? But to me, I think the thing that changes that all the time is how many bodies do you have? How many backups do you have? How healthy are you? When do you need to push the envelope a little bit with physicality, and when can you back off? And that's all day to day, week to week, year to year coaching things that you need to understand. So we used to play 3-2-6 in some dime situations. There were some games where we would predominantly use 3-2-6 personnel. To me, it was all 3-4 Okie defensive stuff. We slanted and angled out of it a little bit. It was a way of us playing a 3-4 structure with, at that point, probably 4 safeties on the field at Two of them were down safeties, two of them were free safeties, so that no matter where the strength was, we could play all the coverages we wanted to play to each side. If it was 3-by-1, we could play trips adjustments to both sides. So in that set, I would actually play with two free safeties. I would bring a backup free safety in, and then we would play with two down safeties and two free safeties. So we were actually we became a four safety team, more than a three safety team. And there were times where we did it as a dime nickel, package. And there were times we did it as a full game plan. So did some slant angle stuff. Always brought five. Had standard pressures from both sides where we could bring five, and then we always carried a 6-man pressure out of it. So there were times where it was good to us. There were times it wasn't good to us, but it was more of a change up per se. But it was also during times where I had more experienced players and we could go back and forth from even to odd and could do things with personnel groups. And we're just not there right now, one, with our depth, and two, with our experience. Subtle changes like that for our guys right now are just not real good for us. So we try not to get too fancy with that. We stay away from that stuff and try to just stay within the system of what we do. Coach Floden, the school that I'm currently at now, this is my 5th year there. My first playoff win at that school. It's been the first time we've been in the playoffs in 10 years. And probably an asterisk next to it with all the COVID stuff and the pandemic stuff with how teams qualified for the playoffs, but playoffs nonetheless. And preparing for a playoff game where it's win or go home nonetheless, whether you necessarily feel like you deserve to be there, whether you would have been there during a normal regular season or not, you're there, and you're in, and you're playing another team that's in, and you got to prepare the same way. You got to get a playoff mentality going. And so that's been a bonus for us. Being able to win that game obviously was huge for the program. And, trying to convince your kids that if you do things a certain way, thanks, Connor and James. I agree. In the back of my mind, I know it's probably got a little bit of an asterisk to it, but we approach it as a playoff game, a playoff win, first one in 10 years. I'm at a school that used to be one of the biggest schools in the county before we got some new schools built. And there's a newer school in our area that was built in about 2011, right around that time. And, ironically, a lot of the kids in our school zone went to the new school, and they're now the biggest school in the area, in the largest classification in the state, and we're now middle of the road. So the script has flipped so much from 2010 and 11, when the school that I'm at now used to be a large classification school, and now we're a middle classification school. And so, it affected talent, depth, numbers, and the way I look at it, it could be ironic, it could be coincidence. I don't know, however you want to look at it, but since that school opened and we dropped in numbers, we haven't been to the playoffs until this year, and obviously hadn't won a playoff game until this year. So getting into it, winning a game with preparation, getting your kids to understand that if you do things the right way, you get good results. Getting kids to understand your weekly preparation. We lifted in class on Friday, the way we always do. Getting your young kids to understand that that's not even a question; it's what you do. All little battles like that you're fighting, from a social media standpoint, and use the term loosely, recruiting standpoint. Trying to get the kids that live in your neighborhood and in your community, and the families that are in your community, understanding that you've got good things going on and you can play good football, and your kids can get recognized. And we've got a 10th grade tailback that's the third leading rusher in the area. So trying to get kids to understand that if they are supposed to go to your school, that you're playing good football, you run a good program, you have good facilities, all the things that in 2020 in high school, especially in Florida, are also relevant now because it's open enrollment. It's school of choice. Kids can go where they want. So, every moral victory, you can get to promote your program is always needed. Uh, it's always a bonus. Pumping social media with those things, and making sure people know that it was the first playoff win in 10 years, and letting people know that you're trying to get a program back that used to be one of the better programs in the area for a period of time, and trying to get back to that, trying to build again. Those are all things that are important, and that's why I'm always, as a head coach, always using social media on top of the work that I do with Play Fast Football for my own high school program. I'm using social media as a way to just do some things different, get word out about your program, you know get the positives with your program and your players out there for people to notice and recognize. Yeah, it's it's just crazy now in Florida, with everything being school of choice, and it's hard to get all your kids in your program in your community. And once you lose a couple, it's hard to build. If the best players in your area don't come to your school and they go to other places, it's hard to win. When you do get the kids and the right kids to come, you got to have some success. You got to get some kids recruited. We got a kid playing at Liberty right now. So I got a freshman playing at Liberty, full scholarship kid, and our tailback from last year is running track at Florida State. So, getting those things out there to let people know that your school has a chance if kids, if kids do what they need to do academically, if they do what they need to do in the weight room, if they put good film out there that they can get recruited at your school. Those are all things that you need to get out there, and all things that people are trying to use against you, to recruit against you and get your kids to go to their place. So, football's about, every sport really is about players. It's about, Jimmys and Joes, not always X's and O's. And, um, you know, uh, getting the right kids that give you a chance to win, and then winning with those kids is the biggest deal. And then promoting it is the biggest deal. So that's what we try to do all the time. Our school doesn't have a lot of athletic skill kids. So, yeah, if you don't have a lot of skills and you lose them, obviously if you don't have a lot to begin with and they're the best ones you got and they're playing and you lose them, obviously the kids that were behind them weren't as good. So now your starters are actually backups, and your backups are actually third stringers. So it's just it all flows downhill, and it's a ripple effect that affects you in a lot of different ways. So we actually had good numbers this year, Coach Greenfield. Even with COVID stuff, our varsity numbers were actually up from last season. Had a lot of kids come out and play football for the first time. Maybe that's because they were locked up for 6 months or 5 months and just wanted to do something. I don't know, but the fact that we've won 5 or 6 games the last couple of years. The fact that we had a kid receive a full football scholarship at Liberty. Who knows what the reason is, but our numbers were actually up this year, so COVID didn't affect us there. Yeah, and that's, when you get a kid that leaves and you can beat that place, it's obviously good to promote to your other kids. We had a couple kids leave us last year to go to a school that we couldn't beat, and that hurt. But from a college standpoint, they didn't get any different offers than they would have got at our place, so that helped to tell our kids, hey, these kids left for a certain reason, and when they got where they were going, the grass really wasn't greener. They didn't do anything different in college. We had a kid sign, so it sucks that that's part of your job as a high school coach now, but in the state of Florida, it certainly is. And so getting kids that are supposed to be in your program to your place on your campus and then keeping them is a big deal. Jack, we were 4-5 right now. Lost. We've won 4 of our last 6 games, and the 2 losses were by 4 points and 3 points. So the last 2 losses that we have been by a combined 7 points. 2 games that we lost late. Gave up a touchdown with 8 seconds left 2 weeks ago, and about 6 weeks ago, gave up a touchdown with about 3 minutes left in the game to lose 18-14. So, could possibly be 6-3 right now instead of 4-5, but it is what it is. So, again, with the situation the way it was with the pandemic, it was about getting through the regular season and figuring out who your players are and what your schemes are to get to the postseason. And we won 3 straight late, played better football late, had a chance to win 5 straight. But it's all good right now. So is that second round of districts is playoffs? Is it second round of playoffs or a district playoff? Is that part of a state playoff? How does that work? So what happens if you got to get through district playoffs to go to state playoffs, Jack, or is that something that is it all part of the state system? I know it's interesting. A lot of the people that were playing football, there were so many different scenarios this year with playoff systems, and I know the one thing that's been interesting in Florida, and you don't know because you're not at all these places, but it's been interesting to me that there are a lot of situations where a lot of teams qualified for the playoffs that wouldn't be in the playoffs, and you think that's a good deal. Um, and then, this week, that first round of the playoffs or the play-in to the playoffs, whatever district you were in, however you want to look at it, there were a bunch of forfeits where teams didn't play, and some of it might have been travel, some of it might have been matchups. I think some teams probably drew some matchups where they said, "Look, there's no reason playing." You might have had some parents or some kids opt out, as strange as that sounds. When they found out who they had to play, you might have had some people opt out and say, "There's no need for us going to play that game." You might have had some COVID issues with kids, um, you know, losing kids, that either contact tracing or test positive or whatever the issue is. But I know for a fact I've never seen anything like it. There were like in our area alone, there were like 14 to 16 forfeits, and as a head coach, I just don't understand why you would opt to stay in a state playoff system, and then when you get to that game, you forfeit. I mean, why? You had a chance to opt out earlier in the year. Why did you opt in? But I think the way they were doing the brackets this year, at least, there were some random draw things where I think some people felt like if they stay in, they can see who they draw. And then if they draw somebody that they don't like or they can't compete with, you just forfeit, which I don't know how much that forfeit costs. Um, I would just have a hard time, unless it was just because of the pandemic and you lost 15 to 20 players or something like that. As a head coach, building a program, trying to maintain the culture of a program, I'd have a hell of a hard time, regardless of who we played, of forfeiting and not stepping on the field. And, you know, I just don't see how you move forward with your program. If it's part of the pandemic, I get it. It sucks. Um, but if it's for other reasons, like kids opting out or parents opting out, or, um, you know, it's, it's just a weird deal. Yeah, Coach, I agree with you 100%. Everybody knew that the playoff system in Florida this year was going to be um, a crazy situation. But I think the bottom line was coming off a pandemic. I think everybody was happy to get 8 or 9 games if they could to get an extra opportunity in the playoffs. I think people were happy for, but teams like yourselves that win a district and have to travel, obviously that sucks. Um, it's not ideal. It's not a good situation. But when you go back to where we were in March and where we're kind of almost heading again with 30 college cancellations and all the nonsense that's going on throughout the country now, I think everybody would still go back and say, even if I have to travel, it's better to be playing and it's better to be in this situation than it is to not be playing. Yeah, Coach Greenfield, I think you have to. I mean, I don't see, um, I don't see how you can possibly work all year with your kids, get to that situation, and then tap out and build a program moving forward. I mean, hell, there's even without a pandemic, there's going to be years where you make it to the playoffs as a district champ or a runner up, whatever your system is, and you're going to draw a team that hell might have 8 Division I players. In the state of Florida, I've had first round playoff matchups where we probably physically had absolutely no chance, but you don't forfeit. I mean, hell, you practice, you work, you put a game plan in, you get your kids to believe that there's a chance, and you go play. And I don't see how. Again, I don't put myself in anybody's shoes. If um, you know, if it's because of a pandemic, if it's because of testing things, then so be it. But if it's because you just feel like you can't compete, you're going to get blown out. I just don't know where you go from there the next season in the off season. I don't know how you build off that. And again, like I said, you don't ever speak for anybody else. You don't ever judge anybody else. But if there's people that are forfeiting because a couple kids tested or one kid tested or whatever it is, we had a starter out this week for coronavirus stuff, and a backup offensive lineman has been out the last 2 weeks. So I think as a coach, you knew that going in. I think you knew, with the stuff that was going on, it was a lot of stuff that was beyond your control, and you can do the best you can with masks and social distancing and hygiene and proper protocols. But hell, you don't control these kids when they leave. You don't know what parties they're going to, who they're hanging out with, what their family's doing. So, as a coach, you can only control what you control. And as long as you don't lose half your roster, if you lose a couple starters, next man up, you got to roll. And, I just think that that's how you build your program. That's the mentality of your program. But again, I'm not in that situation, so I can't speak for anybody else. Yeah, that's the other thing when it comes down to that. You don't take an opportunity away from a senior just because you think things aren't going to go your way. You give that kid a chance to play, all the seniors a chance to play. You give sophomores a chance to play. That's one more film that they can put out there, or huddle highlights if they make one or two good plays. So, um, I agree with you 100%, Coach Greenfield. Um, we didn't have to wear masks when we played. No, we didn't have to wear masks at practice. We had to wear them in the locker room, in the weight room, in the classroom, but not at practice and not in games. Jack, no. Yeah, it's crazy, Jacob, to say that you're still crossing your fingers for a January 8th first game. I think everybody that postponed things thought it would have been a safer, easier, consistent option to start later, and now teams are starting later. Don't know if they're going to start at all. So I'm glad we started. I'm glad we made it through 9 games. I'm glad we made it through to a playoff scenario, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. And I wouldn't go back and do it any other way, because now hell, we're almost moving back to where we were in March. So I wouldn't change it at all. So anything else out there you guys want to talk about? Anything schematically or anything structurally or anything in general you guys want to talk about? Got defensive meetings early tomorrow morning, so unfortunately I can't stay on too much longer. Got to do some work on huddle, and Connor had actually saved our season. It it got us to a situation. It got us to a situation where we could execute a little bit cleaner, a little more confidence with our players, a little bit easier to identify fronts in what we're doing. Got kids to play a little bit faster, a little bit more physical up front. Got our running back to understand where things needed to be run a little bit clearer, and then open some things up in the passing game. So, it was looking back on it now, it was a transition that had to happen, and it was about the best time to do it, and it worked really well for us. So I don't recommend that to a lot of people making a wholesale transition like that after 2 or 3 games. I normally wouldn't do it, but we felt like we had to. The more freshmen that can play, we don't have a freshman team per se, but the more freshmen you can get out there practicing with you and playing and doing things, I think it's always a benefit. And even going down to junior highs and Pop Warner and things like that, I mean, the more they can see football early, figure out what they need to do, figure out terminology, figure out techniques at an early age, I think the better they are. So I'm always high on freshmen playing, and a lot of times we choose on our JV team to use as many freshmen as we can because you got them for 4 years, and we never put juniors down on JV or anything like that just to win games because I'd rather coach my younger kids. So, yeah, we're divorce front with everything we do, Coach Greenfield. So how we set the front has nothing to do with how we set the coverage behind that. So that's always been the way we've been with our 4-2-5 stuff. So it works for us, and that's really the only way right now. I've done it for a while, and the only way I know how to do it. So we're not a field coverage team. We're a formation-based coverage team. So our free safety is going to set everything based on passing strength, and our Mike linebacker is going to set everything either on run strength or where we want to set the front. It's got nothing to do with what we're doing behind it. The only time it has anything to do is when we're pressuring. And we've got certain pressures where we need to be, set to the field or set to the boundary, and then the rotation of the pressure dictates. So, like one of our field pressures, that pressure call and the rotation of the coverage dictates that the free safety has to go to the field. But that's only because of the pressure and the rotation. So. Tough to do, Coach Fain. We're going through the same thing right now with our kid. Experience and reps is the only thing that helps. But if he continues to make the same mistakes in games, it's hard to fix. You would think that there'd be some growing pains and some things that you'd get through, and you continue to get better. But we're struggling with the same things, giving him some decisions to make in a run game and a pass game, and even simple things like counting numbers in the box or throwing the ball to uncovered receivers. And then in the actual passing game itself, within the concepts of it, trying to get him to make simple reads and throw the ball where it needs to go. And, you just got to keep being diligent with what you're doing, keep working hard and getting reps. Getting yourself to a point where hopefully you feel like you're making some improvements. If you're not making improvements, maybe think of ways you can change how you're coaching it, maybe how you're talking to them. Maybe how you're trying to get your points across of what you need him to do. Buzzwords, different things that you try and use that maybe, aren't working or aren't getting across. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the kid. If he can't execute in game situations, you may need to find somebody else. And that's always a tough call to make, especially if the kid you got is the most talented to do it. But the physical talent at the position of quarterback isn't always the thing that makes a great quarterback in an offense. So I think you've got to figure out a way to wrinkle how you're doing things. Maybe the reps in practice, how you're controlling them, or what looks you're giving them, or sometimes maybe you just got to do it without looks and do it. Discussing with one read, maybe just using a coach as one read to say, all right, look, this is the backer we're reading, or the flat defender, or the high safety, or the corner, and just giving them simple one-player reads to make and see how he progresses from there. But I think anytime kids struggle with game time decisions, sometimes that comes down to being a gamer, being a guy that has an it factor. And so it's tough. It's a great question, Coach Fain. I don't know if there is a simple answer to it. The only thing I would try as a coach is I would try, like for us in the secondary with some of our kids that struggle with what we're trying to do, I try to change how I teach it to them, try to change the buzzwords I use or the analogies or things that I'm using. I try to look at my teaching and figure out if there's a different way for me to teach, even though if I've had a way of teaching in the past that I like that works. If it's not working with certain players, you got to kind of make adjustments. So right now, Jasper, the other night in the playoff game, we started 2. We started a 3 technique and an inside linebacker that were freshman ninth graders. Offensively, we don't have any freshmen starting, but we have probably 4 or 5 sophomores that start for us on varsity. So we always try concepts first, and then we try to build the concepts into plays. We don't just necessarily start with teaching. We don't necessarily start with plays per se, as we start with concepts and try and build off the concepts to get a grasp of what we're trying to do, and then an understanding of within the game plan what the defense might do and how that affects what we're trying to do with the QB. So, passing game wise, run game wise, it's always concepts first, and then plays or how the concepts fit into the play next, in the run game and the pass game. That's how we do it. So, yeah, Coach Fain, that's always going to be the deal, right? Isn't it? It was the deal for us this year. We had to figure out which guys were going to show up when the lights came on and which guys were going to disappear when the lights came on. It's no different anywhere in the country. It's no different at any level of football. There's certain guys that are great practice players and just can't handle a game, and then there's certain guys that throughout the week make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of things wrong, and then come game time they just find a way to make plays. So, that's always the coaching wise evaluating your personnel. That's always one of the neat and interesting things to figure out which kids are gamers, who your studs are, who your players are, and then finding out how to put them in position to make plays. That's always to me, that's a big part of what we do and why we do it, as far as I'm concerned. But, again, I think those are the things that a lot of times we get caught up in schemes sometimes, and we get caught up in structures and, 4-2-5, 3-3 stack, over, under, split field, middle of the field open, middle of the field closed, palms, quarters, spread, pro, gap schemes, zone schemes. We get caught up in a lot of those things sometimes. And I think as coaches, there's a lot of other things that we can discuss and help each other out with that are probably more important, and identifying personnel is a big part of coaching. Identifying which kids can play on game nights, which kids aren't flustered. How you coach players is a big deal. Like, I've got so many guys on my team that have to be coached differently. I've got guys that I can jump and get after. I got guys that we got to kind of be careful with how we coach them. I got guys that when they get to the sideline, you have to handle a certain way. We have, like most high school teams, we have some immaturity issues. We have some emotional behavior issues that are prevalent in, young kids sometimes. And, even how you handle players is different. And I think that's part of, coaching and learning how to coach and experience that you got to understand. Sometimes it's more important than just saying, hey, how do you set the front? How do you run your pressures? How do you do this? I think that's something that we need to look at as coaches because it's important. And that's part of the process going through the year. That's part of the building process. It's part of the growing up process. I know for us, it was part of the process of losing a spring game and a kickoff classic because you didn't get a chance to see kids under the lights until it was game one. And we opened up with 3 quality opponents and had a really tough first 3 weeks with really bad results. And from there, you have to make adjustments to figure out who your starters are, who your special teams guys are, which guys are going to be physical on Friday night, even though they might be physical during the week. Which guys are going to show up on Friday night. So, I think good coaches make those adjustments real early. They figure that out early in the season. They figure out how and why they need to do certain things, and that's always going to be part of our job. So, and it's part of the job that's fun. I had a great time this year, even though early on we had some bad results. Even though we're only 4-5 right now. As a head coach and somebody that's been doing this for 22 years now, I had a lot of fun this year learning how to improvise and adjust, learning how to deal with personnel, learning how to, handle certain kids. And hell, even the other night, we were running hot pressures, 2 under 3 deep hot pressures, sending 6. And we've been doing it all year. It's not new. and we had a 10th grade safety that just couldn't get lined up, and you know, with about 3 minutes left in the game, we had a fourth down situation, and there was a timeout. And I actually walked out onto the field and showed him where I needed him to line up. And after we broke the timeout, he went up and lined up wrong again. After I physically walked onto the field and showed him, don't go any wider than this, he lined up wrong again. So it's that's always going to be the interesting part in coaching, and it's the fun part. I know it's frustrating during games. It's frustrating, but after games, when you get a chance to kind of go back and look at all those things and see who you developed. And there's some guys we feel like we've done a great job with, and some guys we feel like we missed the boat with. So that's the fun part of it. And that's, part of it that you have to enjoy. So. We are not, Alex. We are not really a sequential play calling team. So, in other words, there's not a deal as to where we call a play, the Mike makes a tackle, we then call a certain other play, not like the old wing T sequence play calling system used to be with Tubby Raymond back in the day. But you're certainly looking at formations and things to see how they line up and see guys that you're having a hard time blocking, where your numbers are, where your leverage is. So you're definitely looking at who's making the plays and who you're not getting blocked. And then you're trying to figure out, then you're trying to figure out from there how to either get those guys blocked or, where your numbers are, where your leverage is, where the grass and the space is. So there's definitely, you're certainly looking at how teams are playing and adjusting and how teams are, who's making the plays that might be hurting you. So I'm not saying that we don't look at that, but there's no set way to say, all right, hey, we call trap. The Mike made the tackle. We're going to call buck. This kid made the tackle, so we're going to call waggle. That's not how we operate on offense. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's people out there that do it and have a lot of success. That's just not how we do it. We're more so looking at who's making plays, how can we get them blocked, why are we not blocking them, can they be accounted for, do we need to change formations or throw RPOs or do things where we read guys that are making plays that we can't account for. Those are all the things that we're looking at within our offense and how we do it. So, like I said, guys, I got a defensive meeting and some film that I got to look at tonight. So I'm going to wrap up in the next couple minutes. Appreciate you guys being on Saturday night. Short notice. I know I was going to come on at 6:30, didn't get on until 7:30. So I appreciate those of you that hung around. Appreciate those of you that commented, asked questions, brought up some good points. Every time I do this live, I learn something about myself or about other people or football in general or schemes, practice, whatever, guys. And there's a lot of times when we do this live stuff, guys bring up questions that are good points that I then think about with my program. And I think about after going back and looking at some of the, thank you, Carmine, looking at some of the comments and the things that we go through here, I scroll back through and it helps me. It helps me get better as a coach. It helps me, maybe go back and reiterate some things that we need to reiterate. And sometimes when I go back through and talk about things on here, it makes me go back and teach things either again or a different way. So I appreciate you guys being on. Appreciate you making comments, asking questions, interacting. And, sometime next week we'll do it again. And hopefully we're still in the playoffs and I'm getting ready for a third round. And hopefully if you guys are playing, you're still playing and you made it through your game. So again, if you're looking for other stuff, I have a Patreon site, www.patreon.com/Coach Mac. On that Patreon site, the thing that's different than YouTube is I actually have a lot of game clips of us running things and me talking through the good, the bad, and the ugly with how we run them. So if you're looking for more than just whiteboard stuff or, if you're looking to see actually how we do some of the stuff that we do and that we actually do the stuff that I talk about, Patreon is a good site to go to. It's a subscription site. It's $5 a month, nothing crazy. But the reason it is a subscription site is because I do use game clips on there. So I don't like giving that stuff away for free. So look look forward to hopefully getting the Play Fast Clinic rolling again sometime in the spring when if things lighten up with travel and hotels and social distancing. So I look forward to doing all that, and probably got another YouTube video coming out in a day or two, maybe even tomorrow after I have my coaches meeting. So stay tuned for that. So I appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks for following me and Play Fast Football. Remember, you won't play well until you play fast. As always, guys, be safe. I'll see you next time.